Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel UFO World. On today's podcast, we'll be speaking with abductee Terry Lovelace as we dive deep into his UFO experience, a phenomenon that has been following him throughout his life. His acclaimed book, The Incident at the Devil's Den, which we'll be discussing today, takes us through this UFO experience involving him and his friend being taken upon a craft. Along with this, we will review his childhood experiences that led up to this, what he saw whilst he felt on this craft, what these beings looked like, the conversations he had with them, and so much more. So much so that there will be a part 2, as we simply didn't have enough time to delve into everything. So do stay tuned for that. And before we do jump in, Mr. Lovelace is a former veteran of the United States Air Force, serving from 1973 to 1979. He then went on to establish a legal career as Assistant Attorney General for the U.S. Territory of American Samoa and for the State of Vermont as State's Attorney until his retirement in 2012. So, we have an individual here who on paper comes from a stable background, although his story is everything but that in the grand scheme of things. I believe something did happen to Terry, but of course I'll let you guys decide that for yourself. Anyway, let's dive in. Hey Terry, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on board to have this conversation. I'm really excited to delve into some of the things that have been happening over the years for you. So just for those that might not be completely familiar with your story and your backstory as well, do you mind giving a quick or just an overview of that?
Oh, sure, I'd love to. My name is Terry Lovelace. I'm in Dallas, Texas, USA. I enlisted in the United States Air Force as soon as I graduated from high school at age 18 and spent the next 6 years on active duty at the Whiteman Air Force Base, which is on the west side of Missouri. Back then it was kind of in the middle of nowhere, east of Kansas City. It's different now, but the base was a SAC base back then with B-52s and nuclear Minuteman missiles. Now it's home to the B-2 bombers. After high school, I spent 6 years on active duty in the United States Air Force. From there, I finished a bachelor's degree in psychology. I went to law school, graduated from law school, passed a bar exam, practiced law in Michigan, and then as a civil servant, I practiced law in the U.S. Territory of American Samoa, and then again for the State of Vermont as Assistant Attorney General in those roles. And I retired early in 2012. And I've had some interesting experiences throughout my life, and I'd love to tell your audience about them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And obviously, you appreciate the overview there as well. And you've got your books out, The Devil's Den, and I mean, I appreciate that kind of touches on a particular experience that happened, but I know what's been happening with you has been going on since childhood. So, do you mind, I guess, delving into that a little bit for us so we can get a background for that?
Sure. By the time I was 11, I had seen two typical flying saucers, disc. The first one I saw was in 1963. I was 8 years old. I lived in St. Louis, Missouri, in an urban environment with, row houses on either side of us, and lots of people, lots of cars, activity, and we have a little tiny backyard. I'm in this backyard and I'm shooting arrows. I'm 8 years old. I'm shooting arrows into a bale of hay.
As you do.
Yeah, and I'm looking down to fit an arrow into my bow, and I saw it was a bright sunny day in May. I saw this perfectly round shadow move across my feet and in front of me. And I looked up instinctively. My head, I went and looked straight up. And over my head was a 20-foot in diameter silver disc, like highly polished aluminum. And I was just awestruck. I thought, I had no fear whatsoever. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I was thrilled because as a kid, I had a feeling, oh, these things got to be real. There's something to this.
Yeah.
And there is.
Yeah.
Interestingly, as soon as I laid eyes on this thing, there was an audio change. And I was in this neighborhood, as I mentioned, with women not hanging up laundry and cutting grass and cars and dogs and cats and trucks and traffic and just a lot of noise of the city. And when I looked up, it was as if I had my hands pressed over my ears and the sounds were muffled. And I watched this thing in the sky. I dropped my bow and arrow. At one point, I don't understand this. At one point, I thought I should lie down in the grass and I'll have a better view of it. And
Mm.
that really doesn't make any sense. But that's what I did. Now, someone told me that I probably didn't lie down in the grass. Someone suggested maybe they took you up and then they dropped you back down.
Oh, yeah.
But that's an assumption. I got nothing in my memory to base that on. But um, it's wobbling a little bit in a breeze, and I just thought, it was cool in a way. Like if you went into a brand new showroom and looked at a brand new car, brand new sports car on a showroom floor, it had that kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like this
I
is
get it.
really something great. And while I'm watching it, and I really don't have a clear memory of how much time passed. I mean, when you're 8, you're really not that connected with the time anyway.
Hmm.
And after just a bit, it kind of what I call listed to starboard, slanted a little bit, and it shot off at like 0 to 500 miles an hour and vanished in what I called a hole in the sky. Well, there was no hole, there were no clouds, but the point in the sky, I remember that because every time I went in the backyard thereafter, that was the first place my eyes went. Is the
Mm.
last place they disappeared in the sky, and wondering, they're going to come back and see me. Um, and I screamed. I screamed, "Mom!" Not out of fear, but I was excited. My mom told me later she thought I, probably shot one of the neighbors in the head with an arrow or something.
Yeah.
So she's all freaked out. She comes running outside, and she said, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, "Wait, Mom, I saw a flying saucer. It was the coolest thing. You should have seen it." And I'm just manic about this. And she says, "Terry, I don't know what you saw, but you did not see a flying saucer." And I was kind of taken aback by that because I was a pretty straight kid. I didn't lie. I didn't make up stories. You know, I I I thought she would believe me. I was surprised
Hmm.
at her attitude. And she drags me, pulls me into the house, pulls out a one-volume encyclopedia that we had, and flips through it and shows me a picture of a jet airliner. And I'm like, no, no, no. Shows me a picture of a balloon. Nope, nope, nope. Shows me a picture of a dirigible. No. She gets frustrated. I get frustrated. She gives me a piece of paper and a pencil and says, "Draw a picture of what you saw." And I drew a circle and I handed it back to her. And I said, "That's what I saw." And she's like, "You do not talk about this. You understand me? You do not talk about this with anybody. And your father's going to talk to you when he gets home."
Yeah.
So yeah, my dad gets home and he comes in and he's like, "All right, what's all this business about flying saucers?" And he hated it when I corrected his grammar. And I said, "No, it was plural. Or pardon me, it wasn't plural, it was singular, just one saucer." And that didn't set the tone for a good conversation.
Cheeky 8-year-old, right? Just
Yeah.
yeah.
So he says, "Look, you can't tell other people about this." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because they'll think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll think there's something wrong with us." And I'm like, "Oh, I get it. I get it. I get it."
Mm.
So my sisters, of course, spread the news all over the neighborhood that Terry saw a flying saucer. And, I was teased a little bit about that. That lasted a couple of weeks. And then they were on to, you know,
The next
uh,
best thing, next funniest
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
The I mean, there's obviously a lot of what I'm getting from that anyway is obviously your parents were just concerned. They didn't want to be judged because during those days, I mean, obviously the stigma right now is still there, but it's much more acceptable now, right? There's not so much of that treatment. But back then, it's like straight to the mental hospital. Like, what are you talking about? As if there could be a UFO or the flying saucer. I mean, that's why they moved it to UAP as well, because the UFO word had a stigma, apparently. I mean, so
yes.
no, that's and I mean, just there. I'm not sure if it was that incident, but there was something that was quite interesting to us. that I think it was that one there where was the grass, was there like ionized air or something like that? There was.
Yeah, there was that ionized smell with a
Mm,
hint of mowed grass, and
yeah,
the ionized smell was heavy, but it vanished when the thing took off. But I noted that. I noticed the sound difference. Um, and the grass had been freshly mowed. So to this day, if I smell freshly mowed grass, um, kind of takes me back to
yeah.
that time.
Where the reason I mentioned it is because the Soul symposium, the videos got released, and I've been catching up through them because there's quite a few. And Kevin Nuff, he's a like a scientist, and he had a segment on it. I'll actually, if you haven't seen it already, I'll send it to you after. And but he basically discusses the UFO technology, and there was a part in it where he proved, like scientifically and physics wise, that if there's a big enough electrical field, you could ionize the air. So that might potentially offer an explanation in regards to what was going on during that, because obviously there was a craft, electrical field, and then that created the ionized air as well. So when I heard that, the first thing I thought of was what happened to you in that experience there. I'll send the video to you
I
after as
appreciate
well.
that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so that was, and then there was another key incident as well, I believe. Yeah, I guess from your perspective, what else was kind of the incidents that kind of led up to the big one, I guess.
Yeah, nothing really happened between uh, my age of 8. Um, as I state in my book, I had incidents as a child where I had, and this is hard to believe, I know, I saw little circus monkeys in my room, always
Hmm.
4 of them. Um, and when I published the book, I put my email address, terrylovelace@yahoo.com, in the back of the book and said, I'm not a doctor or a therapist, but if you want to talk about something, you want to tell me about your UFO experience, or for that matter, Bigfoot or ghost or whatever you got it, I'd love to hear it. And I've got over 4,700 emails from
Mm,
folks around the world with all kinds of stories. Uh, and that's a common theme for children between the ages of 4 and say 6 or 7, that they'll see. And I'm kind of a data guy. I made a list of what kids see in that age range, and they see monkeys. I had a cousin who saw little clowns in his room. I got emails from kids who saw a raccoon in their room, a
yeah.
deer, a globe of orb of glowing light, uh, Disney characters, all kinds of crazy stuff. And when I laid this out on a piece of paper, it dawned on me that these things have the ability, I think, to appear in a way the child will find most benign. And I think that speaks to the level of influence that they have over human beings. Uh,
Mm. Yeah, that. I mean, I completely agree as well. I mean, Jacques Vallée, he discussed that years ago in his books. I mean, obviously, he talked about them visiting us for thousands of years and how they adjusted their appearances to suit the particular ongoings and what was socially acceptable during those times. And if we're
yes.
gonna, yeah, if we're gonna deem them as interdimensional beings and having this, which
Yeah,
is also
it's
true.
when I look at the history, I'm in Dallas, Texas. There was a famous sighting in Texas from the 1890s in Dallas here, involving what they called an airship, and it looked like a dirigible, and it had propellers on it, and
Yeah.
it had a gondola underneath, and
Yeah.
guys waving, and just crazy stuff. But I thought, well, that's just yellow journalism. That's just trying to sell some newspapers.
Hmm.
And then I thought, maybe, just maybe they altered their appearance to appear in a way the public would find most benign, because this was seen over a track of hundreds of miles by thousands of people. So kind of makes you wonder, one person has a story. It's hard to give it 100% credibility. Then you got another person who has the same story and can back it up, then that gives it, uh, from a witness standpoint, that gives it more validity. But when you got hundreds of people,
Yeah.
and I know there have been sightings like that in the UK. How many people witnessed the Rendlesham event? Wasn't that a
Yeah.
lot of people?
It was, I don't know the exact number, but it was, they were police officers, so they were trained officials firstly, but there was quite a few people that did witness it as well. I went there actually a couple of months ago. They changed the actual site. They've got a UFO there, but then it says on like a little guidepost, this isn't actually where the UFO landed. So I was like, well, that's helpful. Where do they actually go then? But it was quite, yeah, it was quite a few, and they had the ancient markings and stuff. But I mean, you get many people witnessing something. That's been the problem, right? The way data is presumed, it's like if it's not physically there in front of you, then doesn't matter if there's witnesses, it's still going to be disputed as potentially, your mind is making it up. And the mind can make up a lot of things. We get that. But when there's like thousands of people, probably even more than that over the years, who have had these experiences and all connected, that's when you've got to actually look at it a bit more heavily and be like, okay, what is actually ongoing here and how's this adjusting? Because your experience, you saw little monkeys, but then you've just given some, and they had weird smiles, if I remember correctly, right? They didn't look like a friendly monkey you'd see in a zoo, like you're going to pet. They looked a bit
Yes.
mischievous. They were trying to lure you in, maybe.
Well, they look friendly. I think in the book I say they were comical at first,
Yeah. Okay.
but
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
realized that something was going on here, and I never could remember the details of being taken, other than just a couple things. The monkey that was closest to the head of my bed would hold out a paw to me and telepathically ask me, will you come with us tonight, Terry? Come on with us. We'll play. Um, in perfect English, with no dialect, no accent of any kind, just perfect in my head. I heard this thing, and they would always ask that question. Now, it seems odd that they would ask permission, because I think they obviously have the ability to just take us if they want to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And one of the nightmares that I have had for the last 45 years have been, I'm back in my bed as a kid, and the monkey, always the same dream. The monkey is there by the head of my bed, and it holds out a paw. And when I went to take the paw, it wasn't a paw; it was four gray long fingers, and I just flip out. I
Wow.
wake up and have to shake it off and go back to sleep. But yeah, it's an interesting dream.
Why
Yeah.
do you think they're asking? I mean, not that you may know the answer to this, but I'm sure this question is mulled over your head over the years. But I mean, they've obviously got the power, technology wise, and they've obviously got some sort of psi abilities as well because they can speak to you telepathically. Like they're obviously just taking people without permission. But when it comes to you know the adolescence or your earlier stages of your life, they're asking permission. Do you have any kind of theories around why they were asking for permission and they didn't just take you?
I have an assumption.
Yeah,
I don't have any facts to base it on, but I think as a child, um, I would agree to it. I'd say yes, and I think that somehow made it valid for them. I think they operate from a different set of ethics than we do.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, so maybe that was the part of it that they wanted to establish that we're your friends. We're not here to hurt you, kind of thing. Um, I don't know. That's all I can think of.
Do you, just as you was telling me that as well, and I think, I mean, we'll go into other bits as well, but there's been talk of like an agreement between governments and these beings, and so do you think maybe it could be possibly anyway that they, in order to take kids, they have to get permission, but they can take adults? I don't know because kids are more of the tender years. I don't know. I'm just trying to think. It's strange.
I talk about this in the second book, Reckoning, on page 133, I believe, where I say I think there are three possibilities. And that is, number one, we entered into an agreement
Mm-hmm.
with ET, non-human entities, whatever we call them today. Back in some point in time, there's a woman named Eisenhower who's a relative of Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was, of course, a president of the United States back in the 50s. And she says that she knew of an agreement between the United States
Yeah.
and, you've probably heard of that. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
have probably heard of that. It's made the rounds. And I think that's a possibility. Maybe we had a treaty and um, we're agreeing to have them come and visit. The second option is maybe there's a quid pro quo, and that is that we agreed to accept their technology, things that could help us, in exchange for us giving them something. And what could we give them that would be of value to them? Maybe it was cattle and human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. A lot of cattle are mutilated here in the United States. I'm not sure. Do you have that in Great Britain? Mutilated
Not as
cattle?
much, no, not as much as far as I know. But yeah, it seems to be. It seems like America's the pop culture, and where a lot of that's what perceives to me. But we don't have much cattle mutilation, as far as I'm aware. But I'm in London, right? There's not many cows around here,
Very
so
true.
I wouldn't be the best person to ask, I guess.
Yeah. Last summer, there was a farm about 30 miles from us, and it had a mutilated cow and, just a lot of buzz about that. I don't know. I know Linda Moulton Howe, and she published a book and I think a short film called Strange Harvest.
Hmm.
And she presents a very good story for that. But anyway, the third option, that's the second option, a quid pro quo. And the third option is that they come here and they do whatever they want. We had no control over them. And that's just the way it is. And, that's kind of a pessimistic viewpoint, but I kind of think that that's likely.
Well, we don't know their motivations, right? We don't know if they're malevolent or if they're good or bad. I mean, there's been indications of them. I mean, if they're doing good, what good could they be doing? I guess. Well, there's a talk of them bestowing UFO craft to us, right, to help us advance. I mean, that's been coming out in recent newspapers, so that could be the good. And we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but we definitely know there's abductions, right, and that is not with consent. For whatever reason that is, whether it's to obtain something that they don't have, which is probably going to be the likely thing. I think you mentioned it as well about, I think it's mentioned quite a bit that they're interested in like our emotions or the way we function on our autonomy as well, like what's going on underneath our bodies as well. So there's lots of different options around it. Hopefully, we'll find out. Um, we'll find out one day. But it's all kind of theories at the moment. I mean, based on your experience, what do you think? Is there anything that resonates with you the most? Because you speak to I think it was Betty, her name was, right, the Grey, which we can go into.
Betty, yes. I
Yeah,
referred to her as Sue when I was a little kid, when I was 4 and 5 years old. But it
right.
is the same entity that I called Betty.
So that's good, right?
So,
That shows someone it sounds like she was looking out for you. Do you mind give? I guess for the audience itself, do you mind giving us a quick? Because I don't want to just jump straight into that without context. Can you give a bit of context, maybe?
yeah, sure. When I was 4 and 5 years old, 6, 7, even, when the monkeys would come into my room and I'd vanish, and my family has memories a couple of times of getting up in the middle of the night and I'm not in the house, and they freak out, go looking for me, and then boom, there I am. I'm back again.
Mm,
But where they would take me would be to, and there are other people who've seen this too. I didn't know this back in 2018, but there's an experiencer by the name of Deb Cauble, Kauble. And I spoke with her at UFO conference. And she was talking about, yeah, when I was a little kid, they took me. She lived up in Michigan. And she told me they went to a big room with a dome ceiling. It was white. and there were other kids there, and it just blew my mind because
Mm.
that's what I saw. I would be in this large white room with a domed ceiling, and there was kind of a gray rubberized floor, and there would be a bunch of us kids, but they weren't kids that I recognized from the neighborhood or daycare or anything. I didn't know these kids. Um, and I often wonder if I ran across one of them today, would I somehow know that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were all in our night clothes, and there was a woman there. I call her a woman. She was not human. Her name was Betty, and I called her Betty. Well, I called her Betty later on in life. When I was at that young age, I called her Sue, and that's because we had a Japanese woman that lived in back of us, and she reminded me of Sue. And she had large black eyes, but they weren't huge like you see in the motion pictures. They were
Yeah.
more like wraparound Ray-Bans. Um, and her facial features were she had, two nostrils for a nose, and just um, a channel for an ear, a slit for a mouth. I never heard her speak audibly. I always heard her speak telepathically to me. And she kind of took care of the kids up there. She kind of took care of us. And I saw her kind of as a maternal figure, and actually felt some fondness for her.
Mm.
I grew to not like the monkeys, but I didn't have anything bad to say about Sue. So, and then in later on in life, I would see her again, and I would rename her Betty as an adult. And there's a backstory behind that. Uh, Flintstones television cartoon Hanna Barbera was the.
Okay.
Did that play in the UK?
Pardon?
Did that cartoon series, The Flintstones, did that play in the
Oh,
UK?
of course, the Flintstones. Yeah, 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 yeah. Of course, I get it now. Yeah.
I called her Betty because her hair
Mm.
was kind of wonky,
I see.
um,
Yeah.
and that name just stuck with me.
I saw the picture that you provided. And I think it's in the book as well. That you drew of her as well, and it was quite. I see why you called it. It had the kind of the wide hair as well. It looked like a little bit. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that was her natural hair. That was an ill-fitted wig, and because the back of her head uh, was bulbous, was big. I
I
mean,
see.
not huge big, but bigger than ours. And I think it'd be hard for a human wig to fit her properly. Uh, who knows? I don't know. But with sunglasses, I guess without a nose, she could jam it up under the wig
Yeah.
or ears. But
Hold it in place.
with a pair of big sunglasses and a wig, and dressed in normal attire, she just looked like a short-statured human woman, and could
Yeah.
probably walk down the streets of Dallas and not get a second notice.
Well, that raises a lot of questions, doesn't it? Really, if they can, I mean, because there's talk of that as well, that they're here already and they're just amongst us, ultimately.
Yes.
But that could be, and it's strange that she was. Well, I don't know if it's strange she was acting as a maternal figure as well. Whether that was the true intention or not, or whether that's a way to just. I mean, me personally, I believe there's good and bad in everything. I don't believe. So
How so?
yeah, I don't necessarily. I don't necessarily think these entities are there's probably bad and there's people out there and there's bad aliens out there, but there's also good and there's people that are probably trying to make this experience maybe as easier it is for children like yourself, especially children, right? Because it could be traumatizing, right? No doubt. Um, okay, and you said just going back a bit as well, you said that for a couple of years nothing happened, but then there was another. Was there or was there any other incidents that kind of led up to the ultimate Devils
Yeah, the
one?
first flying saucer that I saw was in 1963 when I was age 8. 3 years later, I'm 11 years old, and it's January in St. Louis, and it is bitterly cold outside. And my mom, still kind of tucks me in at night, even though I'm 11. Good night, all that stuff. And it was an average night. I didn't watch anything spooky on television. I didn't have thoughts going back to anything to deal with them. Uh, so just an average night, a school night. And I went to bed, and I woke up sometime in the middle of the night with these crazy lights flashing through the curtains and the blinds in my bedroom. And we lived in an old house, and it was drafty. The windows were old, and they leaked air. And in the wintertime, well, year round, we had Venetian blinds, and then we had heavy drapery over the window to help keep the cold air out. So I saw these lights, these flashing lights, and the first thing crosses my mind is, must be a fire engine. Cool, maybe the house is on fire across the street, and I was excited. And I hopped out of the bed and I went to my window. I was on the second story, and I pulled back the drapery and I opened the blinds and I looked out, and right outside my second story bedroom window is another disc. Same dimensions, only this time I could see the top of the thing.
Mm.
And when I had the event at age 8, that was one of my disappointments. Was I felt robbed that I didn't get to see the top side. Because I was interested, because I didn't see any means of propulsion or markings of any kind. So here it is right outside my window, and it is level with the bottom of the window. And I could have opened the window and stepped onto the top of it. It's
Wow.
weird. And I could see this dome. There was a dome in the center, just classic. And this light, it wasn't revolving as much, but it was shining through my window. And underneath this thing, there was this big cloud of what looked like steam. It was very, very cold night, but yeah, that's what I saw. I don't recall any noise to speak of. I do recall an odd vibration that was in the house. And it made, near that window, I had a little desk, and I had some plastic model airplanes I'd put together, and I had them sitting there. And one of them, they were kind of vibrating, kind of dancing on this table, and one of them went over the edge and hit the floor. And while I'm watching this thing, I took that heavy curtain and I tucked it into the Venetian blinds. So I kind of had a hands-free look at this thing. I wasn't fighting this big, heavy drapery and the blinds all at once. So I had a good view of the thing. And I looked at it for, I don't know how long, maybe a minute or two, a couple minutes. I don't know. But for some reason, I lost interest in it, which makes no sense whatsoever. But I lost complete interest in it. Nobody else in the house woke up. The dog didn't wake up. And I went back to bed and went to sleep. And the thing is still flashing lights outside my window. And the sleep was interesting. I had an event where it felt like I just closed my eyes and opened them. And then it went from that event to morning. So I woke up and I had no memory of this. It just seemed like regular school day, and I hop out of bed and I noticed the blinds, the curtains tucked into the blinds, and then it all came flooding back. And then it was a memory. And then I saw the airplane on the ground, the little plastic airplane, and that added to the validity of it, and put those two together and what I saw. And I think that's what I saw. And, that was a neat event for me, kind of a watershed moment. It made me recognize or believe, hope maybe, that, I saw that thing 3 years earlier in 1968, or 1963. And this is 1968, and they come back. And I had the feeling that they came back to see me for a reason. And, I think human beings just want to search to make a connection, a nexus, to try to help things make sense. And in my mind's eye, at 11 years old, I thought, this is pretty cool. This is great. They came back to see me. You know, the first time I saw them, it's not like it wasn't happenstance. It was planned. It went the way it was supposed to go. And I don't know what the object of the exercise was. I don't think that they took me. Um, I didn't hear anything. They didn't communicate with me in any way. Um, but I think they can be seen when they want to be seen.
Hmm.
And I had an experience I'll tell you about too. I think they can be seen by some people and not others. So, and I thought, you know, well, the last thing in the world I'm going to do is say to my family, "Hey, anybody see the flying saucer outside the house last night?"
At
I've
breakfast,
been
yeah.
down that road once. I'm not going there again. So at breakfast, I'm like, "Hey, anybody see the fire trucks outside?" Nope, didn't see a thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Having an experience like that and having it twice, it changes your perception of life, right? And it's
Yes.
difficult to kind of just, well, you can continue as normal, but you still got the back of your mind, especially for you. You must be like, yeah, I'm going to school, but I just see a UFO last night. Who do I tell? What do I do with it? How did you handle that as a kid?
You know, I felt kind of smug about it.
Mhm.
I felt kind of like I know something you don't
You
know.
don't know, yeah.
You know, and they came to see me twice. You know,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you know, it's interesting. They're culturally, there were television shows that featured UFOs, and always in sci-fi fashion or fantasy. Nothing documentary or even on the Flintstones. There was a little character um, that was in a UFO, and
Mhm.
there was a television show called My Favorite Martian, Space Ghost. There were, you know, half a dozen mainstream television shows that had UFOs in them. Matter of fact, my folks, after I saw the UFO in 1963, took me to a medical doctor
Mm.
who wanted to, because they were worried about me seeing UFOs. They wanted to know, you know, is this mental illness? What's wrong with this kid? He normally doesn't do this. And the doc said, well, you know, I'm here to help you, son. My dad excused himself from the room, and he says, I'm your doctor. You can tell me anything. Tell me what happened. And I didn't trust the guy at first. And I'm like, I saw something in the sky. He's like, well, what did you see? And I said, I think it was a jet. He said, are you sure, Terry? Are you sure it wasn't something else? And I said, yeah, it was something else. It was this round saucer like thing. And he says, I see. In just a moment, he calls my dad back into the room and says, well, we figured out the problem here. This is too much watching of Space Ghost and Lost in Space. And, you know, what kind of television is he watching? You know, you got to change what this kid watches on television. You know, that's
Yeah.
where all this stuff is coming from. So that was a big change in my life. I went home and my folks decided that a healthier alternative to the normal television shows I watched would be the Three Stooges. So Mo, Larry, and Curly nonstop. And that
Consistently.
lasted about 3 weeks. And everybody in the house was like, I can't take that anymore. You know, tune something else on for this kid to watch.
Put the space shows back on.
Oh, you know, and I stumbled on Perry Mason, old Perry Mason show, lawyer. Um,
I'm Googling that because that is, ah, there's a remake of it actually, right? No, must be a remake. Set in 1932. Is that what it is? Defense lawyer Perry Mason. Interesting. Um, but I mean, it sounds like you've had to push it under the rug, basically, and try to. Um, I mean, I think it's difficult for someone in their earlier parts of their life because you're trying to figure out life already, and now you're trying to figure out life with this new information that you've got as a young kid. So it's like, I mean, kudos to you for not going insane and still keeping a trajectory. Because then I mean, you had a really, really good career as well, right? And I think that kind of leads into the instant the devil's den. Maybe in fact that could be a good point for us to move into that as well, because there's definitely some really profound information from that as well. So yeah, what happened, and I guess what was the lead up to it as well? Because I know it's uncanny the way it kind of played out.
Yeah, that's a good track to take. That was at age 11, and then I had at least 10 years of peace and quiet. Now, I worked on a base, as I said, it was a nuclear base with missile silos spread out all over the countryside. And in 1976, about a year earlier, I believe, it was 76, 70, yeah, 76. Um, I was working as a medic, an EMT, a first responder, uh, providing medical care, pick people up in a car accident, a heart attack, a plane crash, whatever happened. Um, it was me and my friend Toby. We'd respond, we'd go out and, do what our mission was, and that was to, save lives and pick people up, transport them to the hospital as quickly as possible. And so that's what we did. And one night we got this odd call to go to a missile silo. And again, it was a very, very cold night. And I don't remember the exact month, but it was January, February, somewhere in that time frame. And it was an odd call. And whenever we got a call to respond to something, we usually got a brief rundown. Somebody's got chest pain, they've keeled over, or, there's a plane crash, or we had nothing. They said, we need to dispatch you to Kilo 5. I labeled it something. It wasn't the actual site name, but it was this missile silo with the command center like underneath the ground for that missile. And we drove the ambulance out, and we were told stay off the radio. And I thought, that's odd. That's just odd. And we got to within about a mile of this place, and there was a security policeman in his car with the heater on. I'm sure he's probably supposed to be outside, but I don't blame him. I wouldn't be either. And this is the middle of nowhere. There's no traffic. There's no houses. There's nothing. Just woods and farmland. And I stopped the ambulance, and I went over, and I'm like, he rolls his window down, like, hey man, what's up at Kilo 5? He says, beats me, but you can go in, but no other traffic can pass. And I'm like, all right. So we drove down there, and to the missile silo. It was easy to find because there were about a half a dozen of these blue Air Force security police trucks, and they had yellow flashing lights on top. And you had a half a dozen of these things, and all of these lights were flashing out of sync. And then because it's so cold, there's this big cloud of gas fumes, exhaust fumes from all these vehicles running. And it gave the illusion of this throbbing, big, glowing yellow cloud. It was,
Right.
it was spooky. And we rolled up on it, and there was a captain, I believe, standing in the middle of the road on a walkie-talkie. And he said, yeah, park your ambulance over there. Your guy's okay. He can talk. He can't walk. A missile technician was servicing a missile.
Was that the cat?
Cats. I'm sorry. You know what? If I lock them out, they'll beat the door down.
It's fine. He's enjoying your story as well. Fine.
Sorry for the interruption.
It's cool.
So this captain said, park your vehicle over there. Again, stay off the radio. And because it was behind a locked gate. And he had his guys open the gate. And we walked in we pulled a litter behind us, walked in, left the vehicle outside the gate. And in this little building, and it's kind of interesting, this little building, there's a desk, a coat rack, and an elevator shaft. And this building's smaller than my garage. It's just a small, tiny little building. And the elevator had one button, down. And that's the elevator that took technicians down to the base of the missile so that they could go in and work on the thing. And this guy was up on a ladder or something, turning a wrench, and slipped and fell, and thought he broke his ankle. Turned out to be a bad strain. But while this is all going on, there we witnessed a an object that looked a lot like I've seen drawings from Rendlesham that look similar to it. This odd, I called it diamond shaped. It was cut at odd angles, and my friend Toby had the presence of mind to count the panels on this thing so he could make a crude drawing of it. And I don't know what it was, but it was sitting in the air. And it's a weird thing because all the security police officers, they got lights on those trucks and cars, floodlights, and all these lights are aimed at this thing. And it's a matte black in color, and it's hovering silently and absolutely dead still. And your mind you see something like this, and your mind is like, well, that can't be. There are
Hmm.
wires, or what? What is the deal here? And we watched it for a minute or two, and then it just shot off. Very much like my experience in 1963 with the disc, and was gone. And
Wow.
we were advised, we were hauled into the hospital commander's office, who told us, and we liked the guy, he's a good guy. And Toby and I are sitting in front of him at his desk, and he said, this is like 4 a.m. He's like, boys, what you saw out there was a prototype helicopter, okay? And because it's a prototype, it's secret. Do you understand? And you can't talk about it. And he said, unfortunately, if you talk about it, it could be bad for you. So, let's keep this under our hat, and this is just between us. And we said, yes, sir. And he took my report and made copies of my report. Of course, there was nothing in my report notating this object in the air. I knew better than that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he dismissed us, and we went out. And the first thing we did, Toby and I both were recently married, and we went home. We told everybody we knew. We told our wives. I told my dad. I told friends. And the security policeman did the same thing. But
Yeah.
it was the kind of thing where, hey, I'll tell you this, and it was just none of us got in trouble because it never got out that we spread it. But we did. We talked about it nonstop because we were about 50-50. Maybe it was a prototype helicopter,
Mm-mm-mm.
but I really didn't think so.
Well, the way it shot off, it sounds like helicopter doesn't do
Well,
that.
yeah. And I was confused because I'd seen things in the sky twice now. And both times they were a saucer.
Yeah.
This wasn't a saucer. Here ago, it might be something else. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, it's
So,
true. But it sounds like, I mean, Toby was there as well, who's obviously a key character in your instance at Devil Den. It sounds like, well, as we'll go into that, I guess, in the next part as well. But it looks like you guys are both been quite familiar with this as well. And I mean, it's really interesting because it sounds like if I was to look back at your story, knowing I've read it and stuff like that, it looks like it was a lead up in series of events that took you to this particular thing that happened. But I just wanted to say as well that it's interesting that it was near a missile silo as well, which is obviously a key attribute when it comes to these sightings. They seem to be very interested in missiles and the nuclear activities and that sort of stuff as well.
there is a big history
Hmm.
between UFOs being seen and nuclear facilities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah.
only not only missile bases, but even commercial civilian power plants using nuclear energy. Uh, there's a gentleman named Robert Hastings.
Yeah, uh-huh.
He's written a
Hmm.
couple books. He wrote UFOs and Nukes,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
and I talk to him fairly often. And he's interviewed hundreds of people that were active duty military who had an experience. And I didn't come out and tell my story until 2018. So I kept this absolutely between my wife and I,
Hmm.
because who can you really trust in your career?
Yeah.
That would have been the end of my legal career.
Well,
So
it was wise. It was wise to hold on to that, and then when the timing was better, you can kind of bring it out as well. And I don't. I think I mean, the last few years have been quite fruitful, I guess, in terms of what's been going on with the UFO or UAP disclosure, and we're definitely getting traction. So your book, the Incident at Devil's Den, is come at prime time to really help, spread awareness around this as well. Because I'm sure there's a lot of experiencers who look at it, and the same way that you read their content or see what's going on with them, you guys can compare notes many ways and be like, oh, so it's adding more voices to the cause. So with the Incident at the Devil's Den, then, because I'm really keen to jump into that.
Yes, I want to. Yeah. In 1977, we worked nights, the night shift in the emergency room from 11 p.m. till about 8 a.m. And, there weren't officers around. There was nobody around unless something happened. So it was pretty easy. I mean, we could, read, we could play cards, it was pretty easy. We had to work, we worked hard, but, on a slow night, there wasn't much to do other
Sure.
than amuse ourselves. So we're playing Hearts, a card game, back in April of '77. And out of the blue, without any backstory or build up or anything, my friend says, "Hey, man, I got an idea. Let's go camping." And I'm like, "What?" I knew I was a city kid. Toby was from Flint, Michigan. I had a pretty good idea. He'd never been camping either. I'd never been camping. And I'm like, what do we want to do that for? What's the idea behind that? We weren't exactly outdoorsmen. We didn't hunt. We didn't fish. So that would be kind of a new thing for us. And at first I'm like, nah, no way. And then the more I talked about it, the more excited I got. And it was a 6.5 hour drive south from the Air Force Base. And we had a 4-day weekend coming up in June of '77. Pardon me. I think the day was the 11th, going from memory. We're a big, long weekend. So we told our wives, we're going to do this. We're going to drive down to the state park and we're going to camp, check it out. If we have a good time, then we'll take everybody. We'll go down and, kind of like a mini vacation on the cheap,
Mm-hmm.
It costs a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of money. And, we did all the stuff you need to do to prepare. Toby was just absolutely ate up with the idea of looking at the night sky. He loved the night sky. And he knew the constellations. He could time a satellite coming over. And that was his dream. He was a math wizard. He wanted to study physics at the University of Michigan. And, he knew his career path. I knew mine. And I wish I'd asked him where that interest in the night sky came from.
Yeah.
Because it came from somewhere.
Sure.
So he wanted to go someplace where he could look at the night sky without there being light pollution. So that's why we didn't stay in a campground. We were going to stay in a campground. And he's like, we can't stay in a campground. There's too much light pollution. There are people running all over the place. He said, no, we need to get out and find our own place and camp. And I'm like, all right, that makes sense, I guess. So we drove down there and we went into the park. We dodged the ranger station and we took a road that was paved, that turned to gravel, that turned to dirt. And we came across this sign saying, no admittance, keep out, no hunting, no camping, no fishing, no nothing. And there was a chain across the road. And I said, well, I guess we're done. We'll go look for something else, someplace else. And Toby's like, no, man, I got this. He hops out of the passenger side of the car. And on that post, there were 2 posts, one on either side. And on this post, what they'd done is they'd hammered a big nail into the post, and they took that chain, looped it around, and locked it with a lock.
Right.
It looked like it was locked, I guess, and hung that chain on that nail, which makes sense to me. If I were a park ranger and I had to go in there 4 or 5 times a day, I didn't want to have to be hunting for keys. Just pick it up and drop it to the ground. So that's what we did. And we drove in and we felt like, woohoo. I mean, we felt like we were a
Adventure.
big adventure. And
Yeah.
we were, we drove around, and there is a plateau. Um, and I should mention, both of us thought that this area that was chained off was some kind of nature preserve. We thought it was something to do with the Arkansas State Park, and it's not. And I didn't find this out till 2017. That's actually land owned by the Bureau of Land Management. It's federal property.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I think that's kind of odd, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But we drove around and we just found this plateau. We found it, and you couldn't see it because it was thick foliage. It was hidden by the trees, and the top of this plateau was level with the treetops. So unless you're right on it, you can't see it. So we drove in, and we drove right up to this road that went at an angle and took us to the top of this plateau. And we drove up it, and we were just blown away because here's this beautiful meadow, no trees, grass, about so high, and wildflowers and birds, and it was just a cool place. And nobody else around. It's like our private campground. We thought we hit the jackpot. This is
Yeah.
cool. And we set up our camp on the side, like on the rim of the plateau. And we did all the stuff. We took a hike. We did all the stuff that you normally do when you go camping. And it was all new to us, so it was entertaining. We burned some hot dogs, had some potato chips, and just did kind of like the normal fun stuff. And it's in the evening, somewhere around 9 o'clock p.m. And we have these blow up inflatable yellow air mattresses we bought. And we had, $10 Kmart tent set up. And we're lying on either side of this fire in the middle between us, and then we're on either side, and we're carrying on a conversation across the fire. And I remember saying to Toby, I could see why people like this. This is really pleasant. Now, it was hot, but there was a little bit of a breeze, and there were crickets and tree frogs, and I don't know what kind of things there are that make noise in the night in the forest, but whatever they were loud. And loud enough that we were having trouble, our voices carrying across this campfire. And we're talking, and during a lull in our conversation, I noticed that it went abruptly silent. And I've heard other people say that they've experienced this too, this odd silence. And it was, it wasn't only silent, it was still.
Mm.
So where we had a breeze before, no breeze. Where we could
Right.
see the trees, the leaves moving in the trees, now everything is just dead still. And the fire is burning straight up. There's no wind affecting the flames. And I thought, this is odd. So I asked my friend, like he's going to know. I'm like, Toby, is this normal? And he made fun of me and says, oh, yeah, don't worry about the bugs. The bugs will come back. We've just been laughing and cutting up, and we've quieted them, and they'll come back. And I'm like, oh, okay. They never did, by the way. And we carry on our conversation for just a bit, and my friend has his head and his torso body. He's looking at something to the west. And he asked me in just conversational tone, hey, Terry, were those lights there before? And I'm like, what lights? I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere. There are no lights. And I couldn't see what he was looking at because his torso was in the way. So I had to stand up. And then on the horizon, I saw these 3 little stars. And they looked like stars. They were all the same size. They were all the same luminosity. And they were sitting in a tight little triangle above the horizon. And they were just far enough above the horizon that they couldn't have been, lights from a distant shopping mall or a train, or there was a reasonable explanation we could think of. And Toby said that could be an airplane. And we knew a little bit about airplanes, and I'm like, I don't know anything that's got that kind of light configuration.
Yeah.
And one of us said, well, if it's traveling if it's traveling right in our direction, maybe it'll give the illusion that it's standing still, and we won't be able to see that it's actually moving until it varies its course by a degree or two. So I'm like, okay, and we're watching it, and nothing happens. And then it rotates. These three stars turn like they were on an axis, and it aligned the triangle, the base of the triangle, parallel with the horizon, with the apex pointed up. And here's where things went strange, and that is that we're just two people, two human beings, and we see this, and this is not the kind of thing you see every day. And I think normal human nature would be to have a conversation about it. Hey, are you seeing what I'm seeing, or what do you think the thing could be? We should have been excited,
Sure.
and we weren't. We were like our emotions were muted.
Mm.
And this sounds odd, but it's the best way I can think of to explain
Well,
it.
you'd have curiosity, wouldn't you? You'd be curious, like, or you'd be
Absolutely.
even fearful. You'd be like, "What is that?" There'll be something there. You wouldn't just be like, "Okay, now what?"
Well, I'm glad you say that, because I should mention too that I felt what I called a mild sedation,
Okay, yeah,
and I wasn't sleepy. It wasn't sleepy. I felt sedated, and I also had this dissociated uh, attitude toward it. This is hard to articulate, but I felt more like an observer than I did a participant in what was going on. So I felt like
mm,
I'm just sitting back watching this play out.
okay, okay,
And these three stars start moving, and they go straight up in the air, and still no conversation between the two of us. I remember my friend Toby said they're really moving now, referencing the stars, but I really don't reference any conversation other than that. And it came to what I call a ceiling. I don't know how high, because I didn't know how big the thing was, um, but I'm guessing like 10,000 feet, just for pull something out of the air for a reference. And it changed orientation and went from being three stars in a triangular formation. It tilted, and then we saw three stars in a line, because the apex of the triangle was pointed in our
yeah,
direction, and
uh-huh,
lights on either side from the tips of the triangle. And it stayed static for just a second or two, and then it started like a glide plane, and it was absolutely headed in our direction. And again, there's no conversation, there's no hysteria, we're just watching this thing. And I recall that it made um, a movement. The point of the triangle tipped down, and the thing did a complete somersault. So we saw the three lights on a straight line, and we saw then the center light, which was the apex of the triangle, dip down, and then come back up around the top and rotate around.
wow,
And I thought that was cool. I thought that
yeah,
was, and I also thought that that was done for some reason for our benefit.
mm,
I mean, I don't know. That's just a wild assumption, but I felt that way. So it comes in over the treetops, and at about 3,000 feet above us, we're on the top of the plateau, the thing comes to a stop, and we can see finally what it is. And it's an enormous triangle. And it's as big as like a medical building or something. It's just enormous. And I don't understand, how could we see this thing this big and it not be seen in three counties?
mm,
But I checked newspaper reports. When I was writing the book, I checked everything. There were no reports about it, none. And it comes to a halt. Like I said, thankfully we camped on the rim of the triangle, so we weren't right underneath it. That would have been kind of more frightening. But it comes to a halt. It's dead still, and there is it's dark outside. The only things we can see is what illuminates in the millisecond of the flashing of the lights on the
Mm.
points of the triangle. And they dimmed the lights somewhat as they came over the treetops. So, but it was still light enough that when the lights fired, we could see that this was a giant. There weren't three things operating independently. This was one structure. It was a giant matte black triangular shape something.
You said it blocked out the stars, right, in the book as well. That helped you realize that it was like an actual like object. It wasn't just three separate stars. It blocked out the stars between it as it came closer. I think you mentioned as well.
Yeah, because that, you know, when I saw this, I'm like, my mind is racing for an explanation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What could this be? And I thought, well, it could be three independent objects all operating in concert. But it wasn't. We found out it was one giant thing.
A big one as well, by the sounds of it.
Oh, a big one, yes. And we still had no fear whatsoever. Actually, we had kind of a mild disinterest and kind of sedated effect. And while we're laying there, and the only thing you can hear is the crackle of the fire because it's dead silent still. From underneath this thing, it shot like a laser beam. And well, actually, before that, it shot a column of white light about the diameter, about this big. And it was like a tube of white light. The illusion you get if you have a spotlight, a high
Mhm,
powered light of some kind, and you shine it out over fog, where
mhm.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a column of what looks like white. And that's what this was. But there was no fog. There was no. It was it was clear. But it was a visible white light, and it landed directly in the middle of the campfire.
Did it come from the center of the
It
triangle?
came from the dead center of the triangle, and you know I couldn't tell if there was something there, but there had to be someplace underneath where it originated, and landed in the campfire, stayed there for a minute or two tops, and then just shut off. And then immediately after it shut off, in its stead, there came the laser beam. Now, lasers were a fairly new concept in 1977. I'd seen them on television, but I'd never seen one in real life.
Yeah.
So and it just turned on, and it did this odd thing where it would land in one part of the campsite for, I mean, really a hundredth of a second, and then move to another object on a campsite, and then stay there for a split second, and then reappear somewhere else. So the point I'm trying to make is we had the illusion that this thing was moving, and it touched everything that we brought. It hit me in the chest at least three times. I never felt a thing. It hit Toby, the campfire, the tent, his backpack, the Coleman cooler, all the things that we brought with us. And I remember having the thought, hey, this thing's checking us out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, no fear. And that didn't stay for very long, and a minute or two, and that shuts down, that shuts off. And my friend Toby, we were silent for a while. And my friend Toby says, show's over. And he stands up and he grabbed his air mattress and headed for the tent, which was right in back of us. And I felt that sedated feeling transition from sedated to sleepy. And they are two separate things. While I felt mildly sedated, I didn't feel the least bit like going to sleep. But my mood, my everything transitioned from from sedated and to sleepy. All I wanted to do was to pick up that air mattress, go back to the tent, throw it in, lie down on top of it, and go to bed. That's all I wanted to do, is go to sleep. So I followed Toby, and I picked up my air mattress. I never took off my boots or
It sounds like
socks.
you was on sorry, it sounds like you was on autopilot mode. It was like, now I must do this, right? Now it's time to do this. It's like predetermined, it's like set in stone. You're gonna be doing that. It's strange.
It was strange. It was
Yeah,
strange, and it wasn't like I had a rational thought that I can recall
yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's time to go to bed. It wasn't like that. It was, and that's what I meant when I say we were more like observers than we were
Mm,
participants.
I see.
So it was a weird place. So uh, I left on. I had a t-shirt, blue jeans, and I wore my combat boots and a watch, and that was it. I fell asleep the second my head hit the pillow, and just like it happened to me before, I woke up some hours later, and at the time we didn't know it. We both wore mechanical watches. They were wind up mechanical watches, kind of state of the art for the day. And if my memory serves me right, mine stopped at 2:30 and Toby stopped at 2:34. Those watches never worked again.
Wow.
And when you read the warranty information, it says, keep away from electromagnetic fields.
Makes
So
sense.
I wish I'd saved that watch, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But I don't. What would it show? It would show that it broke. You know, who knows? Uh, so I saw this flash of lights again, like I've seen before in my life. Yellow, and some were kind of greenish in tint and white, and they were flashing and they were bright. They were really bright. I mean, they lit up this tent like insane for a millisecond, and then it was pitch dark in there. And I wake up and I don't have my wits about me, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's right. I'm camping. Toby and I went camping. And then I thought, what are these lights? And I reasoned that they could be the overhead, flashing lights of a park ranger's truck there to kick us out. And I thought, yeah, that's probably somebody here to kick us out. And then I thought, that's not the end of the world. We'll pack up our stuff and leave. And um, so I sat up, and I in one of these flashes of light, I saw that both of my boots had been unlaced almost all the way down. And I thought, how can this be? I didn't do that. I mean, the military, they drill until you take care of your feet. And I would not have gone to bed like that. I mean, if I had to get up and run, it'd be
Mhm.
a trip hazard. I
Sure.
would have taken them off, or I'd have kept them on laced to the top. That's what I would have done. So, and that didn't frighten me, but it annoyed me. So I crossed my leg and I pulled a boot off because I'm going to fix it properly. When I did, my socks are on sideways.
Wow.
And that's really odd. And that really baffled me. Again, no fear, just kind of confusion, like, you know. So I put my shoes on, my boots on properly, and I turn my attention to Toby, and he's on his knees, and he's to my left. He's looking out of a little flap on his side of the tent, and he's looking at something. And I'm like, "Hey, Toby, what are you looking at? What's out there, man? Is it park rangers?" And in one of these flashes of light, I could see that on the side of his face, um, there was a tear track down the side of his face. And Toby was African American, so he had dark skin. And I guess the saline in the tear fluoresced with that light. And I saw this tear track. And now that scared me. That was my first thought of fear, because I could not imagine. I worked with this guy for a couple of years. I couldn't imagine what would make this guy
Mm.
cry. Very out of character.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I looked out of the flap on my side of the tent, and I saw that this thing that had been 10,000 feet above us, 3,000 feet above us when we went to bed, had descended. And now, instead of being 3,000 feet over our heads, it's literally like 30 feet over the
Wow.
top of the meadow. And that's why these lights are so bright, because we're near one of the points of the triangle, and it's still flashing. It's flashing. And the second thing I saw was there were a dozen, maybe 15. I wish I'd counted them. Little guys walking around the meadow, and they were paired up in twos and threes, and they were walking around just looking and walking around kind of like tourists or something. And I can only see them when the lights flash, and they're flashing at odd intervals. But when I see them, I note that they're typical gray, large eyes. I can't tell and couldn't tell you to this day if what they wore was a garment. And they were all identical, and they were gray. And I have a theory about this. Now, I've had people email me and say, oh, you're wrong, they're this, they're that. I can only tell people what I saw and what I believe. And I don't think these were living sentient things. I don't think they were sentient in the way that you and I are, aware of our being. And I think they were, well, as Calvin Parker used to say, like little robots. You know, some biological material and
Worker
quantum
bees.
computing. Who knows? What's that?
Yeah, worker bees. I mean, there's I mean, if we jump into the whole AI stuff, it's going to be a very long episode of podcast. But yeah, there's been talk of them being workers, just like people just doing the groundwork, I guess you can say. These greys.
You know, I think in my book I referred to them as worker bees.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
And I've heard other people say the same thing. Now, other people have had different experiences with the grays. I can only tell you what my experience was. And I thought that I still think that they were manufactured from an assembly line. I don't think they were living beings.
Was that just because of the way they were just, what gave you that indication, I guess, based on, you seeing that as well?
Particularly my time inside that ship.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have a clear linear memory of everything that happened to us inside that ship. But I'll tell you what I can recall with clarity, and that is that I went to bed and I woke up, I opened my eyes, and I had my clothing and my boots holding in my hand like this, kind of crudely folded, and I can't move. I can't move. The only thing, I can't move my tongue. The only thing I can move was my eyeballs. So I'm swiveling my eyeballs all around trying to figure out where am I? How did I get here? And I'm in this craft, and I don't know if they maybe took us somewhere else, because the interior of this thing was much bigger than it looked like from the outside. And I don't know how that works. Maybe their physics is different. I don't know.
That was mentioned recently as well. I can't remember who said it, but there was talk of craft. This was like from a leak or something. Craft, like the TARDIS, like from Doctor Who, where you go in and it's actually much bigger inside. So yeah.
I mean, from the outside, it looked like a medical building. From the inside, it looked like a football stadium.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's enormous.
Wow.
And everything inside this thing is like a ceramic white or stainless steel, and the flooring looked like, I didn't have an opportunity to feel it. I can't tell you texturally what it was like, but it looked to be like a rubbered type of surface. I saw a couple large garage-like doors, aluminum garage-like doors to my left, a bit of distance down, and there were 3 saucers, perfect saucers, parked, on stilts right there in front of these doors. And that blew my mind.
Yeah,
And
I
that
bet
was
it did.
to me, seeing the saucers there made a connection between where I was and maybe these are the same people that saw me as a kid.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's true, because I remember thinking in my mind, Sue, if you can hear me, I need your help. Sue, where are you? Because again, it's the only thing that I thought could maybe help us. But I got no response from Sue. And while my eyeballs are roaming all over, and I'm looking, and I saw to my right, I saw a row of human beings But they weren't all men. They were like men, women, children, and they're all frozen like we are. They're all nude, holding their clothing in their arms like this. And I can only see them by straining my eyeballs to the right. And all of them were crying because I could see the tears. And I don't know how many people were there because I could only see the first row or two. Now, how long was that column in back of them? I have no idea. It could have been 5 people, it could have been 50 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, maybe survivor's guilt or something. I wonder where those souls are today.
Yeah.
They kicked us out when they were done with us, but they didn't kick them out. So I saw that. And then I saw a little later, I saw a group. I think it was about 7. There would be like 6 men, 1 woman, and they were our age, 18 to 22 in that range. Young people, military style haircuts. The woman had her hair in a ponytail, short ponytail, and they wore tan colored flight suits. And they're a fair distance away from us. But I could see them clearly enough that I believe they wore the same combat boots that I had on.
And they were walking about or on the tables?
Yeah, they were walking. What they did was they, in a little group, there's no conversation carried on between them, but in this little group, they walked across my field of vision, and there's a panel that I couldn't see what was on the panel because I was looking at it from a side angle. And the guy in front did something on this panel, and they did not look at us. They would not look at us. And then they all kind of turned around, and they were nonchalant. They were like, I think they were crewmen. I think they were there.
You know what it reminds me of? Close Encounters, when they took people from the military, didn't they? And that's what's and I mean that kind of plays into the agreement stuff as well, I guess in many ways. But that's and they wouldn't make eye contact with you. Well,
Yeah.
could be guilty as well. Interesting. Okay. And I said you said it had an outfit, and did it have some sort of insignia as well? I said I think I
There
saw
was an
that.
insignia. There was a patch on their shoulders. I didn't see it when they turned and walked away, so it would have been on their right shoulder. But I wasn't close enough to see what was on it.
Right.
There
Yeah.
was a red or orange patch, about so big, and there was some white on it. I don't know if it was a symbol or writing or what. I couldn't see it that clearly.
Let's see.
And they walked away and they were gone. And then between these incidents, I don't know what had happened. I know that there was, things happened, and this is in the sequence that they happened. I saw a 6 foot tall gray being. He was not one of the little grays. And again, you asked me why I thought these things were mass produced. And inside this craft, there's 100 of them literally running around, and they're all task oriented. There's nobody taking a smoke break or hitting the candy machine. They're just moving about, but they look like they are doing something. So this guy is where the gray things are about 3 feet tall. The guy that I saw was 6 foot tall. Now, this is odd, and I've only heard this from a couple of people, but his complexion was not gray. His complexion was pink, like pinkish skin. And he had like the characteristics of the gray, hair like mine, hardly any at all. No discernible ears, just a hole in the side of their head, 2 nostrils. And again, I only saw him in the steps that he took to walk in front of my line of sight. And he stops at the far left end of my line of sight. And I followed him, and I thought, this is a guy that's in charge, because he carried himself with that kind of authority. And you can just kind of tell when somebody's in charge. This guy was in charge, or at least that was my
Yeah.
impression. Now, we saw some frightening things, and this is the most frightening thing that happened to me. And I have had nightmares about this for years. I strained my eyes to the left as far as I could to look at this guy. And as I did, and I think just by chance, by happenstance, he turns his head and we locked eyes. And that was an instant.
Shit.
He was in my head. And I don't know how else to put it. This guy was in my head. And he knew, and it was the biggest invasion of privacy I've ever experienced.
Yeah, I bet.
And I felt like, the word they commonly use is download. I felt like, yeah, maybe that's a good term. I felt like he knew me, he knew my parents, my wife, my secrets, my ambitions. He knew everything about me. And all I got radiating back from those black eyes was just like raw intellect. The analogy that I use that I think is best is that when our children were small, we had a dog. We had an English setter. Beautiful dog, kind of my dog became, because I took care of her mostly and fed her, and she would come over at night, put her head in my lap, and she'd look up at me with those big brown eyes. I'd look and pet her on top of the head, and she knew a couple of words: food, walk, limited vocabulary, but we had a little bit of a dialogue back and forth. I mean, I could never walk in and say, "Hey, how was your day?"
Yeah.
But we each knew our roles.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was the master, and she was the pet. And in this encounter with this pinkish guy, I felt like I was the dog in the equation.
Okay, Terry. Well, look, I'm sure we can be speaking for 2 to 3, 4 more hours, as there's so much more we we wasn't able to go through. So what we can do is we can definitely get another podcast, another call booked in, and we can go through the other aspects as well. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you once again for coming on board. For those watching, do check out Terry's Lovelace's books. I'll leave all the links in the description. Terry, before we do finish, is there anything you want to say to wrap up?
I would like to say I would appreciate an opportunity to come back, because there's a lot more that I would like to talk about.
Absolutely.
So again, thank you for this opportunity, and look forward to seeing you again.
Superb. All right, great stuff. Okay, well, everyone watching, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see everyone next video. Cheers.